2014. Visit seat.co.uk. Seat Financial Services, subject to availability. Retail only. Excludes Seat Scrappage Incentive Scheme. T's and C's apply.
LBC travel in Hertfordshire. 2 of the 4 lanes are still closed on the M25 clockwise at junction 25 at the A10, and it's because of an accident. There are long delays now from junction 22 at London Coney. Anti-clockwise is open but very slow from junction 26 at Waltham Abbey. Also in Hertfordshire on the M1, southbound delays from junction 6 at Bricket Wood to 5 at Watford, and this is after an accident in Watford, although Exchange Road has now reopened. In Cambridgeshire, only 1 lane's open on the M11 in both directions at junction 12 at Cambridge because of an accident that happened much earlier on this morning. Still long delays though both ways. And in London, 1 lane's been closed on the A2 westbound just south of the Blackwall Tunnel at the Sun in the Sands, and that's very busy on the approach. On the trains, Heathrow Connect services have just been suspended. Heathrow Express trains are able to run, but I'm afraid with delays they're running every half an hour instead of the usual every 15 minutes. And Chiltern Railway services, they're delayed by about an hour, and that's because of a track problem at Beaconsfield. LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Speak to Sadiq. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, takes your calls.
Good morning, you're listening to Speak to Sadiq. This is your chance to put your questions to me, the Mayor of London. So ask me anything within reason you want by calling 0345 6060 973. You can text on 84850, or you can tweet at LBC using the hashtag #SpeakToSadiq. Hi, James. Morning.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me speak. Phone lines are open. There are a couple free. That phone number once again, 0345 6060 973. Anything you want. It's up to you. Don't start complaining at the end of the encounter that we haven't addressed the issue you feel most passionately about, because you have every opportunity to pose the question yourself, and I'll avail myself of that opportunity first. It seems very fashionable to ask politicians their views on equal marriage and abortion, Sadiq Khan. So could you please remind my listeners what yours are?
I support same-sex marriage and was proud to vote for that, notwithstanding the threats made to me and my family, and I support the right of women to have an abortion.
You surprised at Rees-Mogg's comments yesterday?
Well, look, I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg is entitled to his views, and everyone knows my views, and I think my voting record and what I've done throughout my adult life demonstrates my commitment to the rights of women to choose to have an abortion if they wish to do so, and the right of people who fall in love to get married if they choose to do so.
Do you understand correspondents to a programme like this who have tweeted in their droves this morning that O'Brien won't have the guts to ask Khan about his views on abortion and equal marriage? Because I genuinely don't understand that.
Well, listen, as somebody who's been asked my views throughout my political life about on a whole host of issues, I'm not surprised to be asked a question. I'm often asked a whole host of questions that are nothing to do with my job, and I answer them because I've got nothing to hide. But I think, look, I think people's concerns who are tweeting you or getting in touch with you is there are some sort of double standards, and I've never been one to complain of double standards, and I'm happy to ask the question that you ask me. And
finally, what role should religious beliefs have in political positioning? I mean,
can I just say, the best way to answer that in relation to issues around abortion is just, if you get a chance, watch again. You probably have the film Vera Drake. Watch the consequences of outlawing the rights of women to have abortions. It's one of the most difficult decisions a woman will make, not taken lightly. And I'm not sure we're going to go back to a situation where there are backstreet, very, very dangerous illegal abortions. But also, the idea that, us men spend all day lecturing women what they can and can't do with their body, that's not something I subscribe to.
Well, cleared that one up. Should we crack on with the call?
Let's do it. The first call is from Ray in Highbury. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning. Hi. Good morning, sir.
Good to hear from you, man. What's your question?
Hi, sir. First of all, I wanted to say that motorcyclists feel that they have been neglected by the government when they play an important part in serving London's community, first of all. And I wanted to ask you, sir, are you willing to work with the police and the crime commissioner to secure a special grant to help the police find a more robust approach to the city's motorcycle crime epidemic? As you have noticed, we have acid attacks, machete attacks, knife attacks, anger grinding attacks to bikers across London at the moment, and nothing has been done. So I really, really want to know, on behalf of the motorcycle biking community,
Yeah.
What are you planning to do about this?
Ray, thank you for your question. For those listeners who don't ride a motorbike, may not be aware, but actually motorbike crime has gone up and it's gone through the roof, not just in London but around the country. Let me give other listeners, James, Ray will know this, some numbers. So last year the numbers of motorbike crimes, thefts, was roughly speaking 16,000. The year before, about 5,000.
Why? Do we know?
A number of reasons why. Cars are now far more secure. You'll remember 20 years ago we'd be talking about stereos being nicked from cars and stolen. Yeah. And because manufacturers spent some time investing in better design, better prevention, there are far fewer stereos stolen now because it's part of the dashboard. Same with sat-navs. I'm afraid manufacturers haven't moved with the times when it comes to motorcycles. Actually, most motorcycles, at best, will have a steering lock, and a responsible owner will have a chain, a padlock. Actually, we're now speaking to manufacturers. Can we have immobilizers? Can we have tracking devices? And we're doing lots of prevention work, Ray, there. As far as the police are concerned, the police are working incredibly hard too. A number of things taking place, Ray. One is more operations on the ground, a number of operations taking place across London. Secondly, better intelligence gathering. And thirdly, more prevention work as well, because you're right. I'm afraid lots of the incidents we've seen around acid attacks are people on the back of stolen mopeds using mopeds as a way of muggings, phones being stolen, bags being snatched, and other issues as well. So it is an issue we take seriously, Ray, and part of that is working with manufacturers to help us design out some of this crime.
What about the other side? I don't know if Ray's concerned about this, but I am. This idea that if you take your helmet off, the police aren't allowed to chase you.
Well, can I say that that's just not true?
Is it not?
No. What the position is this: the police do pursue people involved in criminalities, whether it's on a moped or other vehicles. What they've got to do though is they've got to be trained, and so not any old police officer can be involved in pursuit, and they need to seek authority by phoning it in, by speaking to the operator, and that means, by the way, other police devices can be used, helicopters, CCTV, to help the police in their pursuit. Sometimes the police will decide not to chase somebody on a moped for reasons of safety, for the public, the police, and the person on the moped as well. But the police are now looking into other things they can do in addition to a pursuit. For example, can they deflate the tyres further up the road of motorcyclists? Can they spray stuff onto those in a moped? The stuff you see under special lights, so they can catch them later on. And so the police are being innovative, and one of the reasons why people are now using mopeds or acid is because the police have displaced other forms of vehicles being used by the bad guys.
And Ray was specific about seeking some sort of investment, some sort of special grant to tackle these issues further.
So there are three big operations taking place right now from the Met Police on the ground and intelligence gathering. As far as police resources are concerned, and Ray, you won't be hopefully surprised for me to say this, I've been lobbying for the last 15, 16 months for more resources for the Met Police in London. Our budget's going down each year. By the end of 2020, we'll have lost more than £1 billion from our budget. It's not sustainable. We've had to close down police stations. We're consulting on closing down further police front counters. We've lost lots of police staff. We've lost community support officers. And one of the things we've got to do is persuade the government to give us more resources, to do a U-turn on the cuts they've planned so we can keep police numbers at a good level, but also invest in the sort of crime you're talking about, because, you know, the bad guys are evolving, finding new ways to harm us and to be involved in criminality. We've got to evolve and find new ways to keep people like you and other motorbike riders and other Londoners safe.
So you can't say to him specifically, yes, I'm going to get hold of X pounds.
I'm really sorry, Ray. I'm afraid I can't give you that assurance that you want and need, because the monies that we've got are very, very tight. The amount of monies I can raise from London, and I raised the police precept council tax last year, is limited. Roughly speaking, 3/4 of our budget comes from central government, and they need to do far more than they are at the moment.
Let's go to the next one.
Thanks very much, Ray, for that call. The next caller is somebody called George in Kensington. Hi, George. Morning.
Hello, Sadiq. How are you?
Not bad at all. Good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good. Very well, thanks.
Yeah, enough of the niceties. Let's crack on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a Notting Hill Housing Trust tenant of 20 years, living in North Kensington. And next Wednesday, the 13th of September at 6 p.m, I and other Notting Hill residents will be protesting outside Notting Hill's headquarters at Bruce Kenrick House in King's Cross. And the reason for this protest is that on that night there's going to be a meeting of shareholders to decide on a merger between Notting Hill and another housing association called Genesis. who could be described as the apex predators of the housing association world. Now, this merger is going to directly affect the lives of around 68,000 Londoners, tenants and leaseholders of Notting Hill and Genesis. And yet we, as residents, have been given absolutely no say in the process whatsoever. The meeting of shareholders, these are shareholders who we don't know, who we've had no communication with. And what I'm interested to know, Sadiq, is whether you feel it's acceptable that a decision that will so profoundly and so directly affect so many of our lives and our homes,
68,000 households.
Let me deal with that head on, George.
Should be presented to residents as virtually a done deal.
Let me answer that directly head on. Firstly, no. And so I this week have written to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Sajid Javid, and separately wrote to the Prime Minister saying I'm really concerned about the lack of voice given to social housing residents, council tenants, residents like you as well. And bearing in mind that the public inquiry into the Grenfell Tower fire is not looking at the issue of social housing, I've suggested to the government they should appoint a social housing commissioner whose job will be, he or she, to make sure people like you and other housing association and council tenants and residents have and by the leaseholders as well, have a much better voice than you currently have. And I followed that up with a meeting with Sajid Javid this week, who is receptive to the idea.
But this is happening on Wednesday.
No, let me ask in two parts. So one is the issue of the wider point about the rights of social housing tenants. The second issue about the particular merger between Notting Hill and Genesis. After we've finished, I will take your details, George, and I'll make sure my Deputy Mayor for Housing, James Murray, is in touch with you to let you know the steps we're taking, speaking to Notting Hill and in advance of the meeting on the 13th of September. Because you're right. By the way, this isn't the first merger, James, of different housing associations, sometimes for very good reasons. The point George is making is actually they've had no say, no locus, no views taken from them what they think about this merger. So on the particular issue of Notting Hill and Genesis, please, George, give the LBC team your details and I'll be in touch with you today, me and my Deputy Mayor, James Murray. Secondly, in relation to the wider issue of tenants like George and residents, we've made representations to the government about a social housing commissioner.
Yeah, we'll do that, and George will stay on the line and do that. But you know that Genesis in particular, who I think you've had dealings with since becoming mayor, they have perceived in some quarters as not really liking social housing, and there are fears that this £19 billion portfolio that will be controlled by the new organisation Notting Hill Genesis will... Well, we've seen it happen before, haven't we? With the secure tenants on fixed incomes have had their rents go up by about 177% in the most extreme cases, and selling off of empty properties is practically a pastime for these people.
We've had examples of housing associations, properties that are previously social housing rents, they've been replaced with properties that aren't social housing rents. We're quite clear in relation to any grants we give to housing associations. The conditions are where there is regeneration, there's got to be like-for-like replacements, plus also they've got to add additional social housing replacements. But the fact is, this isn't the last merger.
Though. I mean, we know that in Chelsea and Westminster, in Kensington and Chelsea, they wrote a cheque for the council instead of building the social housing. I
mean, look, I don't want to go backwards. That was to do with Boris Johnson's allocation with Genesis. The money, but you look at all the stuff we've done with HAs.
It doesn't speak of a cracking reputation if that's the kind of... But I mean, trick they played under the last mayor, and now they're getting a bigger portfolio under your mayoralty.
Well, no, they're getting a specific grant to do a specific piece of work, and what they're not doing is being rewarded for bad behaviour. But I'm afraid, look, this isn't the last merger that will take place. There are many housing associations who've got particularly financial problems. Bearing in mind they're not getting the sort of grants from central government they used to get. Bearing in mind the cuts that have been made over the last few years, who are having to merge. Some housing associations, not unreasonably, are trying to find other revenue streams, bearing in mind they've not got money from central government. Some of them are charities, and that governs some of their behaviour. Some aren't charities, and so they're finding other revenue streams to help them do the stuff that they should be doing, which is helping those who can't afford market value housing.
Just tell me what you think personally about the Chief Executive Officer of the Notting Hill Housing Trust describing social housing in the past as low-cost living for life funded from the public purse.
I think those comments are unacceptable, and I think
what can you do about it?
Well, look, as somebody who as a child lived in social housing and has got many friends and family who've lived in social housing, obviously I disagree with those views. There is a big role, particularly bearing in mind the cost of living in London, for social housing. One of the things that I've done as a consequence of the negotiated settlement from central government is to ensure there is more social housing built in London. By the way, James, since 2011, and I know some people don't like talking about the past, since 2011, Boris Johnson didn't fund any council housing in London. We're changing that.
Okay. You've got the details of the next caller.
The next caller is David in Bournemouth. Good morning, David. Sorry for making you wait.
That's no worries, mate. Morning, how are you?
Not bad at all, not bad at all. Davidson, you're not allowed to be nice to me. James O'Brien doesn't allow it.
Let's get on with it.
On to the question, David.
What it is I think in May 2016, after the Nice attacks, you asked Toby Harris to do a review for counter-terrorism measures within London. You received that review in October 2016, I believe, and you've still yet to make any comment on it or a formal response, and your office said that you would make a formal response at some point, and you haven't. I'd like to know why, and would you make a formal response on it?
Thanks, David, for your question. For those that aren't aware, so Lord Toby Harris was asked by me to do a report on our preparedness for a terror attack and made more than 100 recommendations. I'm afraid since his report there have been 3 terror attacks that have been successful in London, a number thwarted. So, David, almost a half of the recommendations, if not more, have been implemented. I'll be publishing in October.
Why haven't you published it? Why can't we see the Harris report?
Well, the Harris report is published. It's what David's asking for is which of the recommendations have been implemented. So not unreasonably, David wants like a scorecard report on what's been done, what hasn't been done. A number of the things, David, weren't in my control. So Lord Toby Harris made recommendations for central government, for the Department of Education, for those who control River Thames and other things. So I'll be publishing in October, 1 year on, response, which will set out what things have been implemented, what is work in progress, and what things we've been unsuccessful in getting central government to do. So watch this space. And I will say this, David, it's just worth all of us recognising what the counter-terror experts, our fantastic police, have said, which is, I'm afraid, what you've seen this year isn't a spike in relation to attempts by terrorists to disrupt our way of life and harm Londoners. It is a shift. And that means we've got to make sure we're doing all that we can to keep Londoners and those around the country, including those in Bournemouth, safe.
Can we let David? Do you want to come back at the Mayor on that?
Yeah. There was 2 points within the review.
Please.
I think it's point 31 and 32. It was in relation to putting barriers on bridges. That's not the exact wording of the report. Does Mr. Khan think that if he'd have maybe responded a little bit quicker to the report and maybe put some bridges on Westminster or London, that maybe what did happen there might not have been quite so serious?
So, David, Toby, just don't like correcting listeners, but you're wrong. Toby he didn't mention bridges, but he did mention the importance of designing out terror attacks and some of the vehicle impact measures we've taken since Toby's report. You'll see if you come to London, look around Parliament Square. We've tried to build in so you don't notice some of these barriers. You see them outside shopping centres. He didn't mention bridges, but lots of things have happened in relation to the bridges that you will know about in relation to Westminster Bridge and London Bridge. And we act on security advice we receive. There are other things that are happening that we don't discuss publicly, but we're taking steps to try and design it as much as we can. Successful terrorists and anybody who's been to the Carnival or the New Year's Eve fireworks will have experienced some changes from previous years.
Are you going to be speaking at the Labour conference?
So far, it doesn't look like it.
Why not?
Well, look, I'm not criticising the leadership for wanting there to be more space for members to speak. And as somebody who spent lots of time working with volunteers who work their socks off, I think it's right and proper they should be given more of a chance to speak.
It's not really either or, though, is it? I mean, you could be uncharacteristically brief. You don't have to take up lots and lots of time.
Well, look, it's not in my gift. I'm looking forward to going to conference, and I'm sure it'll be a great
You're the
conference.
most powerful Labour politician in the country.
That's very kind of you to say.
Well, no,
so.
it's not. It's a statement of fact. You're the Mayor of London. Actually, Andy Burnham's probably the second most powerful Labour politician in the country. He's the Mayor of Manchester, and neither of you are going to speak at the Labour Party conference. Just tell me why.
Well, it's not my decision, so I can't tell you why. And
Tell me why you think it is, then.
I think not unreasonably. The Labour Party leadership wants to allow as much time as possible.
With respect, Mayor Khan, that's rubbish. Why won't they let you speak?
No, I will be at conference. I will be speaking at various events, I'm sure.
I'm not going to let this go. Why won't they let you speak, in your opinion?
I think because the leadership has decided to give more time for members who work their socks off, who contribute to us being the biggest political party
possibly
in Europe.
explains why they're going to let more members than usual speak. Why won't they let you speak? There's hours of platform time at the Labour Party conference. Why can't you have 10 minutes?
And I bet at the end of this conference there'll be more Labour Party members taking part in the conference from the
great,
stage
but
than ever
why won't
before.
you be one of them?
Well, look, I mean, there's nothing stopping me putting my hand up and wanting to make a speech
Are you
at
going
the
to do
conference. I will probably do other things at conference
So
rather than.
So why can't you speak at the Labour Party conference as the Mayor of London?
Well, it's not been decided yet. I mean, I'm sure there are people listening to this in Labour Party HQ who may well think that you're making a good point. I think I understand.
So you'd like to?
Why? Of course. Look, somebody who's met me and knows my ego knows that I love speaking in a public fora. But I mean, I'll be going to conferences as I do every year and having a great time speaking to our fantastic members who've worked so hard this year in the various elections that have taken place, and looking forward to socialising with them as well.
Barry's in Westbourne Grove. Barry, what would you like to ask
Barry, good morning. Barry, you can't be nice and pleasant to me. James doesn't allow it. Good morning, Barry.
Oh, well, absolutely not. But I would like to ask you, good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Barry.
You, as a London taxi driver, how can I have any confidence in your nighttime commission when Philip Colvin QC is the chairman? That is in light of the fact that he's being paid by Uber to defend their drivers in a prosecution that's being brought in London by the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association. It's a huge conflict of interest. You put him in his position that he's in, and I would like to know why.
Well, let me deal with your point directly. So Philip Colvin QC, his job is to chair a part-time night commission, and the nighttime commission advised me on things to do with live music venues and nightclubs, because you'll be aware over the last 8 years they've been reduced by 50%, and we're trying to improve nightlife. Philip, of course, was involved in acting for Fabric and kept Fabric open. That's his expertise, advising Amy LeMay, and they advised me on issues to do with nightclubs, live music venues. Separately, Transport for London, which has nothing to do with the Nighttime Commission, Transport for London separately have a number of officials who consider applications from private hire vehicle operators, whether they get a licence or not. And you'll be aware, which is why you've asked the question, that TfL are currently considering the application from Uber, whether they get a new 5-year licence. Can I reassure you and all listeners to this programme, Mr. Philip Colvin QC, the Nighttime Commissioner, had nothing at all to do with the decisions made by the officials at Transport for London. There is no conflict, in real or perception. There is no democracy under my administration. And I can guarantee you, Barry, the decision by TfL officials will look at the evidence of Uber's operation over the last few years before deciding whether they get a new licence.
How hard is it to have a top team that doesn't contain anybody who's being paid?
Well, it's worth just
to do anything by Uber.
No, it's quite easy, but the issue with
why don't you do it?
Well, the issue with this QC is barristers operate on what's called the cab rank principle. Forgive the pun in the current context, and that means they take on the brief given to them by a solicitor, by a client, unless there are exceptional circumstances. In this particular case, Mr. Philip Colvin QC spoke to the Bar Council's Ethics Committee and said, "Look, I've been asked to take on this case. I work 1 day a week for the Mayor in the Nighttime Commission. Is that a reason for me not to be exempted from this?" And the Bar Ethics Committee said no. So he also separately, by the way, James, spoke to the monitoring officer in the GLA, said, "Look, is there a conflict, real or otherwise?" And the GLA's advice from the officials, and he's nothing to do with Uber, by the way, Barry, was no, there is no conflict. So to give Philip Colvin QC some credit, he's done things by the book.
Barry, you probably want to come back on that.
Yeah, I do. I'd like to say that Philip Colvin QC is being paid by TfL, and he's also being paid to prosecute drivers in London, Uber drivers in London, when Uber pay no tax here.
No, so he's defending 3 Uber drivers, not prosecuting.
No, the LTDA, the licensed taxi drivers, are prosecuting. He's defending a company on tax, and he's being paid taxpayers' money to defend a company who pay no tax in this country at all.
Well, look,
very little.
So Philip Colvin QC is not being paid by TfL, just for the avoidance of any doubt, in case anybody thinks he is. What he is doing is, when he's not working 1 day a week chairing the Nighttime Commission, he's got a full-time job as a QC. By the way, also, this is the guy that takes on councils when he acts for nightclub operators, but councils aren't complaining about conflict because he's on the Nighttime Commission. He's brought cases that affect the police. Barristers do that, Barry. When I was a lawyer, I often took on cases that were unpopular, and so I'm reassured there is no conflict, real or otherwise, with Philip being the chair of the Nighttime Commission. There's a separate issue about the decision taken by TfL to renew the Uber licence. That's a decision taken separately from officials in TfL.
Who makes that decision? I mean, rather than just saying TfL.
Yeah, so there is no. So there are just to reassure you and listeners, there are named officials in Transport for London who look at the licence of operators, and then within Transport for London, there are named officials whose job that is. And it's a quasi-judicial role, as you'd appreciate. They can't give a running commentary. I know it's frustrating, and as the chair of TfL board, I'm often frustrated that I can't talk about
Do you have a say?
applications.
Do you have a vote? Do you have a...
I'm the chair of the TfL board, so ultimately, of course, I've got to... as the chair of the TfL board, and
So
officials
it's
who work,
in your gift, this
well,
licence?
no, it's officials who decide.
And you're duty bound to follow their decision?
Well, I'll wait and see what the advice is.
So you're not duty bound. You could call time on Uber in this city.
Up until now, when I'm month 16, I've not seen an application from TfL officials being passed on to me. But clearly, because of the public interest in the Uber case, clearly I'll be informed of the decision.
And when's that? When would you expect that to land on your desk?
So the 5-year licence that was given by the previous mayor TfL expired in May of this year. They were given a 4-month extension whilst TfL were considering further things. So end of September is when the decision.
Next time you're here.
The next time I'm here, assuming it's not in the next couple of weeks, we'll have made a decision.
Okay. Will it be influenced by the fact that 32 assault claims were made against employees of Uber over the past 12 months? That's roughly one every 11 days.
I'd be very surprised if the TfL team weren't looking at all those sorts of issues, because all those issues are issues that have been raised by stakeholders and are issues that, are issues that affect whether an operator has their licence renewed. Do you
have any understanding of why Uber drivers are accused of sexually assaulting or raping customers almost 3 times a month?
Well, the police are looking into this. I mean, there are. I mean, this is information that we publish on an annual basis. The numbers of people, private hire vehicle drivers and black cab drivers who have criminal action taken against them.
I can count on one hand the black cab drivers who've been prosecuted or convicted of crimes like this. And when the Sun submitted their freedom of information request to Transport for London, the results were astonishing.
No, listen, one is one too many. I mean, you're talking about 30 plus. One is one too many. And that's why I said one of the things that TfL will look into when it comes to whether an operator gets the licence or has it renewed is conduct.
You have teenage daughters. Would you let them get an Uber?
Well, I don't generally talk about my family, but I will in this case because obviously it's relevant. My 2 daughters who are teenagers haven't got an Uber app. Anybody who knows me and my wife will know we spend a lot of our time being the minicab firms for our daughters.
We all know that, but if they said, I'm going to get an Uber, Dad, I'll put it out there. My eldest is 11, so she's a bit young. If she was 14, I'd say, no, you're not. Here, take some extra money. You're getting a black cab.
Well, we pick them up. I
want an answer to this. Would you let them?
No, I'm not going to be hypothetical. Our daughters aren't allowed to take a cab. We pick them up, drop them off. Other parents do.
Okay.
Sorry, if I could just... could I come in on this?
Of course you can, Barry.
Of course you can, Barry. It's your show.
Sorry, your job, Mr. Mayor, is to protect your public, is one of your things that you need to do. And the endless list of crimes that are being reported against Uber drivers in London is now really going off the scale. I think in the last month we've had reports, stuff that I wouldn't like to say on live radio that is happening in the back of Uber cars.
Sure.
And it is your job, sir, to protect your public.
Well,
by licence them, I don't know if you will or whether you won't, whether they'll get the licence or not. But I have to say, it is on you, Mr. Mayor, to protect your public. And by allowing these sorts of things to go on, that are going on in London, and it's now coming out in almost every mainstream newspaper, almost on a daily basis, of an attack. I mean, we even had an Uber driver attack the very heart of this country and our establishment by attacking police officers outside of Buckingham Palace.
I don't know that that's a reflection on the app. I think that the passenger safety issue, I'm absolutely full square behind you. But if an LBC employee went out and did something nuts, it wouldn't necessarily reflect on everybody that works for LBC.
I think Barry's making a wider point, though.
Yeah.
Barry's wider point is one that there appears to be a disproportionate amount of criminality from this particular private hire vehicle operator. And my point, Barry, is, and I know it's frustrating for you, is until we make a decision public and we have decided the application, I shouldn't be given a running commentary on them. Let me tell you why it's frustrating for me as well as it is for you, and it must be. Can you imagine in a legal case if they judge during the course of the case kept on giving comment and running commentary? You wouldn't be surprised, therefore, if the party appealed, saying the judge had prejudged the outcome. So all I'd say is TfL looking at the application. As I said to James, we have until the end of September to reach a decision. And then, of course, feel free to criticise either way, as I'm sure people who aren't happy with the decision will do once the decision's made.
Are there 13,000 private hire drivers working with inadequate criminal background checks at the moment?
Yeah. Let me explain that. So we've taken advice, TfL have taken advice, and the checks that take place for the private hire vehicle drivers is, roughly speaking, 115,000 of those. We've been advised that the checks need to be more enhanced. And so 13,000 of them, more than 10%, I'm told, aren't the enhanced checks required. And so we're now saying the only ways you can be approved is the one approved contractor that TfL have assigned to do the enhanced checks. It's called it's the old CRB. It's now called DBS check, the disclosure checks. Either use the approved contractor, or if another licensing authority has done the enhanced check, you can get it checked. And so there are 13,000 affected, and they've got to do the new check with the approved contractor.
And are they picking people up in the meantime?
I think they've got 28 days to apply for the new enhanced check.
And if they don't do that, their licence becomes invalid?
They can't get a licence, unless they do the enhanced check.
And how much
Correct.
effort is put into policing this?
Oh, well, this is the point I say to Barry. We've quadrupled the number of compliance officers from the previous minister. There's now 250 compliance officers, and we've done other things as well to make sure we get rid of the issue of touting unlicensed drivers, unbooked drivers as well, because it is a big issue in London.
So, in conclusion, the next time you are here for Speak to Sadiq, this one is drawing to a close, we will know whether or not Uber have had their licence renewed in London.
Yep.
Do you want to book your place now, Barry?
I can't wait. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think the last 5 years, this company have come into London and have rode roughshod straight through TfL. They've ignored them completely. The fact about the DBS checks is a scandal. We are told, and I fell foul of this myself, when I did my last CRB check to be re-licensed, my application was held at the police stage for about 2 or 3 months. Now, it was looking that it wasn't going to come back in time before my licence expired. And I was told, there was no ambiguity about it. I was told by TfL that I would not be allowed to work if that CRB didn't come back in time. Now, you've just told me, Mr. Mayor, well, in this case, the private hire drivers are given 28 days. Now, why?
Well, no, to be fair, Barry, you're comparing apples with pears. If a private hire vehicle driver is waiting for the DBS check, they can't drive. We're talking about a specific example of those who weren't aware that they needed to have the enhanced check because they used a different way of getting approval. So what we're saying is any private hire vehicle driver, unless they've got an old money CRB, new money DBS, they can't drive. But for this particular set of drivers who weren't aware their checks weren't enhanced, they've got 28 days, and if they don't get it done, they can't do it. But I'd say this as well, by the way, Barry, you rightly talked about the last 5 years, but I think credit where it's due. We've increased the number of cab ranks, we've increased the number of bus lanes black taxis can drive in, we've quadrupled the number of compliance officers, we've given grants to black taxis to move to electric and given money towards scrappage, and also we've made sure that you can use contactless and credit cards to help your customers. So I think it's unfair to give the impression of the last 15, 16 months we've not done a lot to help the black taxi trade, which is really, really important as a form of public transport in London.
And that concludes, Barry. We're going to have to wait for the next time. We're already 7 minutes over. Is that all right?
Fair enough. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Cheers, Barry. Appreciate it.
And before you go, why won't Jeremy Corbyn let you speak at the Labour conference?
On that note, listeners, it's been great to be on Speak to Sadiq this month. I might come back next month. I'm not sure. I'll think about it.
Unbelievable. The time now is 10:37. Thomas Watts has the headlines.
49 million people could be affected by Hurricane Irma, which has killed at least 8 people. The largest ever Atlantic storm is continuing to hit the Caribbean, leaving some islands barely habitable. The Brexit department is taking questions in the Commons ahead of a debate on the so-called Great Repeal Bill later. It's as Brussels is reportedly leaving arrangements for the Irish border solely on the UK government.